My name's Cassandra. I sit within the graduate recruitment team at Lendlease, and I'm joined today by Dan, one of our finance graduates, Michael, who was a finance graduate and has now rolled off into a Treasury Analyst role, and one of our lovely managers, finance managers, Brenda. So we'll just take you through what the finance team does at Lendlease, share a lot more into our operations and how we operate, how we work, and then going into some of their stories of their experiences and share some more detail. And then I'll take you through the recruitment process and what we look for and any other helpful tips for application. So just to get started, we've got a nice video. If it wants to go to the next slide. My computer's decided at this point it doesn't want to work. Okay, here we go. Okay, Brenda, if you want to talk us through our competitive advantage.
Definitely. So not sure how much everyone here knows about Lendlease and what we do. So just to start off with, we might just talk a little bit about ourselves and what we as an organisation do overall before we kind of get into a little bit more of what finance within Lendlease looks like, which will be in the next couple of slides. So broadly, I guess we name ourselves a property developer, but we run what we call an integrated model. So we have within our business 3 arms: a development business, a construction business, and an investments business. And we function globally across the world, across a number of major cities, operating under those three banners of businesses broadly. So what we do in our development business unit overall is like the bread and butter of building out a development pipeline. So we do have some images and case studies on some of the projects that we've developed, but one of the more popular ones that you guys might have seen in New South Wales would be Barangaroo and Darling Harbour, where we take large sites and do what we call urban regeneration, which is bringing something back to life effectively in terms of taking a large area of land, redeveloping it, looking at what we think the optimum structure of what we would put on there is, and working with all our stakeholders and customers, including governments, the custodians of the land, what we think the best mix would be, and the people that are going to use that land. So at present, we've got over $110 billion in our development pipeline globally that we're looking to develop out, and that forms a large chunk of the work that we do. Within our business, we also have a construction arm. So the construction is very much what you expect it to be. Our construction business works with our development business on our internal pipeline. And then we also have a construction business that works with external clients as well. So bringing to life some projects that are owned and managed by other people. And then thirdly, bringing it all together is our investments platform. So this is our funds platform and our assets platform, where we provide services, so funds management services, asset management services, And typically we'll hold a co-investment stake in a lot of our projects as a result of that. So it's a little bit of having skin in the game, and trying to continue to earn a return off some of the best projects that we develop. So that's broadly what that integrated model suggests. I think our competitive advantage is really that we try and execute that integrated model really well, and we're doing that globally. And that speaks for itself through, I think, the strong pipeline, the funds under management that we have, and our strong construction backlog revenue. Balance sheet strength is another competitive advantage for us. So that is what we have on balance sheet, how we structure our projects, and so how do we, I guess, deliver as much as possible, and with a finance hat on, how do you do that efficiently so that you're using your capital efficiently, and then our track record associated with just delivering what we think is quality design with sustainability as a focus, and safety always is #1 focus for all our people and stakeholders. Any questions there just on what Lendlease does before we move on? No? Excellent. Next slide, Cass. So this is just a little bit of a placeholder slide to show you guys where our presence really is globally. So our head office is in Sydney, and that's where a lot of, I guess, the projects in New South Wales that you would have perhaps come across exist. So Barangaroo being one of our bigger ones, Darling Harbour, we did some work and that's completed now. And then what we've got at the moment that we're working through being Sydney Place and Victoria Cross. But overseas, we've got a number of projects in London and across the United Kingdom. We are the largest developer in Milan, not something that everyone can say. And then we've got a number of projects across the US as well. So one of our more notable ones coming up is in the San Francisco area. So it's called what we call the San Francisco Bay Area project, and that's working with Google on a number of the land banks that they hold there and what they'd like to do with them. So it is a lot of partnering with major stakeholders and customers across the world. Next slide, Cass. So from a finance perspective, I guess broadly that there's probably 4 types of roles that our finance teams are structured under. So we have what we call business partners, and they are broadly the members of our finance team that partner with our operational assets and operational teams. They understand your financial numbers, they support strategy, they support your decision making. So they sit very much on that commercial end of how we make our money, how we provide value to our stakeholders, and finding the balance between finance and operations, and creating that little bit of natural tension that always kind of exists, and supporting the business as that impartial partner. And then we have what we call our project activity. So this is really around what are our project models, and might be running scenarios on some of those things, providing reporting and analysis through the structures to all the relevant stakeholders on, project profitability metrics, sensitivity analysis. An example might be, at the moment, inflation feels like it's a hot topic. So a number of our finance functions working through projects will be running through scenarios and what happens on a construction site when inflation suggests that our supply costs will go up. What are the impacts on our profitability, and are there things in our client and stakeholder management that we need to be taking into account when we price and bid for new projects? Which kind of takes us to, I think, the next page, Cass, where we've got our financial control team. So every business unit has what we call financial control. So broadly, like your controller function that manages a forecast, manages a budget. There'll be an element of statutory reporting for all our legal entities. And then that assessment of what is the performance of our business, our portfolio. So picking up what is our project performance, our overhead structures, and bringing it together to say, what is our business? How do we manage our business? And how do we provide insightful information to those who do manage the business from a strategic perspective, an operational perspective. And then kind of being the glue across all of it is what we have as our finance services function. So they provide a lot of the transaction accounting for us, and we have some functions that are outsourced. So it's a little bit of working with our outsourced providers there, but also, I guess, adding value through seeing what efficiencies we can generate, understanding enough of our projects so that you're driving systems and processes that are consistent globally, despite having very different environments that we operate in. Any questions up to there?
I had a question for the previous slide with all the different kind of projects and things like that across kind of the world. I was wondering how easy and kind of interconnected the offices are, and kind of providing the opportunities to work in like other countries as well.
So that's something we definitely encourage. So where Australia is our head office, and a lot of our employees are based in Sydney, what we try and do is kind of send our homegrown talent overseas. Where we're not particularly large in some of the overseas offices that we do have, it's not as easy to attract, for instance, the best talent. So sending our best talent from Australia is kind of our way of seeding talent overseas, if that makes sense. So we really encourage it. It's at all levels. So, we've had grads that have rolled off the program into roles overseas. One of the things we're looking at is whether or not we can have a rotation overseas as well. And then, from all levels of senior management. So if I think about, I'd say pretty much all of our CFOs are Australian, and a majority of our CEOs are Australian. And then from a finance function, it's a combination of people that have moved from Lendlease Australia, people that just happen to be Australian that are attracted to that brand over there. So, the culture kind of goes with us. And it's that blend of finding what is the local culture to get the most out of your local dynamics, and then having the right blend of talent across. So definitely that's a yes. And that's one of the main reasons I think a lot of people work with us is, that ability to travel.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Great. So just on some of our projects, and I'm hoping everyone here has visited Barangaroo. Don't tell me if you haven't. I'm just going to pretend you have. But we've got the 3 office buildings. We've got the casino that we've done the construction for. But as a developer, I guess we've controlled the design. We've owned the land and kind of participated through that integrated model that I ran through before on the majority of this project. So we've got a little bit left to go in terms of residential on here, but the majority of the precinct is complete. And a lot of that was working with a lot of the stakeholders, seeing what we as an area needed in that Barangaroo precinct, and kind of bringing it to life over what has been at least more than 10 years. I think we secured that back in 2007. So it's been more than 10 years of working on that precinct by the time it looks to complete in the next couple of years. And then some of our completed projects at Darling Square I mentioned, which has like the ICC, that convention centre. If anyone hasn't been to a show there, fantastic venue, plugging it myself. And then there's a bunch of the retail, the office. I think CBA has one of their offices down there as well. Crown Sydney is what our construction business worked on. And then the Commonwealth Bank Stadium as well in New South Wales that our construction businesses worked through. Some of the projects we're working through at the moment. So One Sydney Harbour is the residential towers. They're the luxury apartments that sit as part of Barangaroo. So they look to complete, I think, in 2024. And if I think Michael, Dan, I don't know if you guys have done the site tour of those apartments, but they're very, very nice, high-end luxury.
I was there last week. I can back you up on that, Brenda. I was there last week.
The Victoria Cross Integrated Station development, so that's a new building that we're developing, so commercial, that we're building over the station there, and then the Powerhouse Museum in Parramatta. So it's a blend between what our construction business does and what our development business does, but you'll see the Lendlease brand everywhere. So let me introduce you to some of our grads. So Dan has started with the program officially, I'd say this year, but he started with us last year in July, August, if I'm right, Dan?
Yeah, correct.
So I'll let Dan tell you a little bit about him, what he's doing, why he chose Lendlease. And then if you guys have any questions, feel free to hit him up with some questions after he's done.
Thanks, Brenda. So yeah, I've just clocked over 10 months with Lendlease. I'm part of the 2022 cohort, but had an early start in the program last year in August. So I've had the benefit of a couple of months to get my feet before the rest of the 2022 grads came in. I guess I'll just start with a little bit about myself. I actually studied at Macquarie Uni, like you guys on the call as well. I did a Bachelor of Actuarial Studies and Applied Finance between 2018 and 2021. So I just finished that last year in November. Very glad to have it out of the way. If any of you have come across a actuarial studies student, you know, we're not the happiest of people at times with all the maths and statistics we have to do. So I've completed my studies at Macquarie, and over that time I was working for a company called Campus Living Villages, which provides student accommodation for a number of unis around the world. They actually own and operate Macquarie University Village, which I stayed at. So kind of kept it all within Macquarie Uni over those 4 years before finishing up and starting at Lendlease last year. And I've recently just completed my actuary program for my final actuarial qualifications as well. So it seemed I didn't get enough of it, my undergraduate degree, and didn't have enough of studying, so I went straight back into that at the start of this year as well. So touch wood, I'll get my results in a month. So I've been fortunate enough, since I had my early start at Lendlease, I've kind of gotten a long rotation, all in the same team. So I'm currently in the development financial control team. So I think it was point number 3 when we're talking through what finance does. It's a lot of management accounting, forecasting, budgeting, generally talking to our development business and understanding how much money we're making, where our money's going, and other performance metrics like that. I also had a brief stint with our communities business as well, which they don't build up, they build out. So rather than towers, office buildings and residential apartments, they do master plan communities, selling lots of land to mum and dads buying their first home, for example. So I'm a little bit biased, but I would say working in development is probably the best part of Lendlease to work in, or at least one of the most exciting. I think probably it kind of encapsulates the reason why I was attracted to Lendlease in the first place, which was I had a pretty strong analytical skill set in finance and economics, but I had an interest in property development and real estate. So I wanted to combine those two. I think as well, a lot of people feel that accounting and finance is sitting behind a screen looking at numbers all day. So I kind of wanted to see a more tangible outcome from the work that I was doing, which I definitely get when you're sitting in an office building in Barangaroo and you can literally see the tower that you're doing the cash flow forecasting for going up right outside the window. I've got some notes here as well. So other than the management accounting part of it, which I guess puts the structure around my day-to-day job, a lot of that's monthly reporting, getting together the profit, cash, capital, sales and sets is what I've been trained to reel off to people like Brenda as it flows up the chain to our group finance managers. But I get to do some other kind of unique tasks as well. So some of the stuff I'm focusing on at the moment has to do with payments on time. So analysing, the thousands of invoices that Lendlease processes month to month to make sure that we're paying all of our suppliers on time and abiding by the government regulations when it comes to engaging with small businesses and making sure that we have Indigenous representation as well in our supply base. So Lendlease actually has some targets, which I can't rattle off the top of my head at the moment, but to make sure that a certain proportion of all of our development and building activity is being funneled through to Indigenous businesses to make sure they're getting the representation they deserve. As well as that, probably the other kind of key task that I'm responsible for in development is our future steps forecast. So Lendlease has I guess a foundation, you'd call it, or a charity called Future Steps, where we donate 0.1% of all of the revenue from our apartment sales and community lot settlements to go towards funding housing and development and construction opportunities for people who have been victims of domestic violence or need just a leg up when it comes to housing and shelter. So I'm responsible for pulling together the donations that come out of the development business to go towards that particular initiative, which is, I think, a really great example of how, you know, a career in accounting and finance is more than just numbers. It actually has a tangible outcome in the real world. And so, like, to give you an idea of what that kind of materializes as is when you're thinking about the $20 million apartments that are settling in One Sydney Harbour, 0.1% of that works out to be a couple of $1 million over the life of the project, which can make a huge difference to some of the people that we're putting that money towards. I think a lot of people also have questions about, you know, like, what's so good about Lendlease's grad program. Lendlease as a company is fantastic, but I think the grad program probably stands out as a bit of a jewel in the crown. I know we're all obviously biased, but people within Lendlease and externally rave about the grad program for, I think, 3 key reasons. One of them is the rotations that you get to do. So even though I've spent almost 12 months in the same team and I've learned a lot, I get to roll off into another position where I'll get to learn new skills, meet new people, and get exposure to new parts of the business. So that could be rolling into another business unit. So, you know, maybe going and working for retirement living, for example, or it could be up into a group role where I get exposure to some of those really senior executives, or it could be into another function like Treasury. And I'm sure Michael will talk about his time in Treasury as well. Secondly, I think it's the exposure to senior leaders. So, for example, I sit just around the corner from the Managing Director of Development for Australia, who I think it was you, Lachlan, that asked the question. I had a really good answer while Brenda was answering it. He's an Aussie who became CFO of Europe. So he's from a finance background. He was a finance analyst on Barangaroo, and he went over to Europe and became the CFO, but now he's come back to be Managing Director of Development, to give you an idea of the international opportunities that a career in accounting can get you. As well as that, I think it's just the opportunities that being a grad gets you. You know, they say people will do anything for a grad, and I found that to be very true over the past 10 months I've been here, just in terms of people always having time to go and grab coffee with you if you want to talk about, you know, what their careers look like at Lendlease or other opportunities that might be available to you. As well as that, in terms of opportunities, you see people who were grads 10 years ago. So in my direct team of 4 people, 3 of us are grads. One of them was a grad with Lendlease 10 years ago, whose name, funnily enough, is also Daniel. So it's just great to see that people come through our accounting and finance grad program and they stick around, because the networking and the opportunities and the exposures are always there to help you be the best you can be. And I think I've been told to also just give you a piece of advice as well, in terms of, I think, making the most out of your time as a grad. And it would definitely be just to put yourself out there. I know it sounds cliche, and I'm sure that you'll hear this 1,000 times as you go through the number of these kind of events, but just putting yourself out there and saying yes. I find just, you know, even being in the office gets you opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten the chance to see or hear about. You know, getting pulled into a meeting on a particular project or a particular decision being made just helps you become a better person and a better professional when it comes to applying your, you know, accounting and financial knowledge at Lendlease. So I might leave it there because I've talked for quite a while. So if anyone has any questions, I know Michael will be introduced in a second, but Michael's rolled out of the program, but I'm still in the program. So if there's any kind of specific day-to-day, what's it like for a finance grad questions you have, I'm the person to answer them.
One quick question for you, Dan. You mentioned both balancing your studies for your actuarial qualification as well as working. How has Lendlease been able to accommodate your studies after your undergrad degree as well as your full-time work?
Yeah, great question, Tyree. And I think there's kind of 2 answers to that. So I obviously had an early start last August while I was still completing my undergrad degree. So I was only working part-time while I did that. I was working 4 days a week. So Lendlease were more than happy I'd already been accepted into the grad program, but they needed the resource there. So they were more than happy for me to work part-time while I finished off those studies. So yeah, that's one part of it. Then also with my postgrad studies, and mine was slightly different because obviously actuarial studies isn't accounting or a traditional finance postgrad study, but Lendlease offers, there's a particular further education policy that specifies, the time off you get for studies, financial support for those postgraduate studies, and it's all really flexible. I know I haven't actually started my CA yet, which is probably the most popular choice for postgrad studies, but I know several of the other guys in the grad program and people in Michael's intake were really supported in their teams to complete that. I know, there's kind of last minute assessments that come up and, you might need a day off all of a sudden to complete the assignment and get in on time. As long as you have the conversation with your line manager or your steerco representative, and it works around your work hours and being flexible, it's always a green light to fit that into your schedule.
Thanks for that.
All right, we'll hand over to Michael now. So Michael has completed the grad program and has rolled off into a Treasury Analyst position.
Yeah, great. So, hey guys, I'm Michael. I studied a Bachelor of Commerce at UNSW and I majored in Finance and Accounting. So I was in the 2020 intake as a finance grad, and since then I've rolled off, as Cass mentioned, into a Treasury Analyst role. So one of the main reasons, as Dan touched on, that I chose Lendlease to do the grad program through was the basis that they had 3 rotations. So what that really means is you get 3 very discrete areas of the business that you get to work on. And there are a couple of benefits that are really specific to having that kind of exposure. So firstly, you're able to develop a really great network that you otherwise wouldn't potentially have access to if you were to stay in one role for 2 years. So that means reaching out to a whole bunch of different people that you wouldn't have had exposure to otherwise. It means that you're learning different software platforms that Lendlease gets to use, but it also means you get to understand Lendlease as a company a lot more than if you were to just sit in one area of the company, because we are such a massive company. We globally, and in the 3 arms that Brenda spoke about, it's a really great way to really understand the industry as well as specifically Lendlease. Another huge benefit to the 3 rotations is that you actually get to find out what you want to do when you roll off the grad program, which is often a daunting and quite a large decision. But getting exposure in 3 different areas means that you can have a better idea of what you might like, what you didn't like, and it really just facilitates that conversation when you do come to the end of your grad program as to where you might want to go. It's not really just taking a stab in the dark anymore, because you've had some real hands-on exposure and experience in different areas of the business. So another point that I thought was really fantastic about the Lendlease grad program was the postgrad studies. So it's actually not something that all all Lendlease grads get. It's specific to finance, and I think that is such a major benefit to the Lendlease finance grad program. So we get paid study leave, some of the fees are subsidized. But one of the other benefits that aren't so obvious at first is the fact that you're working in industry with people who have so much experience that goes towards potentially your studies. So for example, one of the subjects I was doing last semester actually, was in direct correlation with what I was doing at work, which firstly is fantastic. To actually feel like what you're studying has a direct relation to your work is great. But second to that, if I was ever unsure of a topic or needed further explanation, my manager was an expert on the topic, so I could just go and have a chat with them. And so quickly it just became an area that I could become familiar in because of my exposure and the fact that I could just chat to my manager when I'm sitting next to him for 5 minutes and ask him a question about, I don't know, the seminar homework or something like that. And they're so happy to help. And I think that's one of the really great things about doing postgrad with Lendlease. So the rotations that I got to do, seeing as I finished, I did 3 rotations. My first one was in retail asset management. The second one was looking at overheads for our property business, and the last one was internal audit. So they're all 3 were very different to each other, and working with different people that I wouldn't have been able to work with had I just been in one of those single roles meant I got to use lots of different platforms. I got to understand the business a bit more, and it did help me finally settle where I wanted to go in my roll-off position, which was a Treasury Analyst. So I'm in the group treasury team, and so my team specifically focuses on group liquidity and financial risk management. So to put that in a bit more of like a common term, the liquidity component is working out whether we have enough cash to meet our daily financing needs. If we have excess cash, how we can invest that in a way that gives us both the best return but also flexibility. And on the flip side, if we don't have enough cash, which of our debt facilities best suits our needs? So can we draw down at a lower rate, but we're sacrificing the flexibility to repay it tomorrow if we have a receipt coming in, or vice versa? So that's something that I really enjoy, and it's a strong focus of my role. And then the financial risk management component to my role is, as we spoke about before, inflation is such a hot topic. So for example, if all of our costs of goods that we're purchasing to build our projects are skyrocketing, how can we use hedging and other risk management strategies to minimize our exposure and lock in a rate now, so that if inflation were to keep skyrocketing or the cash rate increases or all those sorts of things, how our exposures to those sorts of potential costs can be minimized. So in terms of some advice, it's actually the same advice that I gave to Dan and his cohort a few months ago. So I think the first one is kind of cliche, but it is true. It's be a sponge. You're going to be exposed to so much information, and I mean that in a positive way. So just soak it all up, because really that's going to be how you just get the most understanding of the industry and the company, and trying to work out how you want to set up your career. And so flowing on from that, I think another really important point to take on is about building your personal brand. So at the time, you might be absorbing lots of information and getting to know the company, but at the same time, the company is familiarizing itself with you. And it's really important to put yourself forward in a positive light. So many of the managers are good friends, they go for drinks, they chat, and they want to talk about their grads. So give them something positive to talk about, because then you're going to be at the forefront of their mind. Managers chat, they say, oh, my grad Dan has been great. And then the manager that he's talking to may well be your manager on the next rotation. And you already go into that with a manager with a positive take on you. And I think that's a really great thing and something you can focus on when you are a grad. A way to do that is through nailing your small tasks. So this was something that I was quite adamant on doing early on, because it means that people get really comfortable with you and they're willing to give you more interesting work. They're more willing to, if you need certain leeways for your studies or anything like that, them knowing that they can trust that you're going to get the job done is such a great way to set yourself up for success. And then I think the final piece of advice that I would give is with regards to your grad family. And I think this is something that's quite specific to Lendlease. I know a few other grads who aren't at Lendlease haven't had this same experience, but my cohort is very cohesive and we really enjoy each other's company. We're not grads anymore, but every 2 weeks we'll all come together and have a chat, talk about our experiences, what's been going on in the company, if we've had any hurdles. And the thing that I want to stress is the people in your grad cohort are the only people really who are going through very similar hurdles to you. So it's so fantastic to be able to come together and work out a problem that you're all probably facing. Things rarely happen in a vacuum, so talk to each other. It's something that Lendlease really encourages, particularly with all the development programs that you'll be doing, all the trainings. It really facilitates a cohort that's nice and cohesive and really close together. And I think that's something that I really benefited from and continue to benefit even after the grad program has finished for me. But yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Michael. And now on to Brenda to talk to her role and her experiences with the grads and any advice that she wants to share.
Thank you, Cass. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first, and then maybe my experience with the program. So I am not a Lendlease grad. I started my career in professional services. So I was a grad at Ernst & Young, but I worked in property. So I probably spent maybe like 8 to 9 years at Ernst & Young. So I was there for quite a long time, but enjoyed all the perks of professional services. So kind of did my stints around from audit assurance into like their advisory practice, did a little bit of transaction services, and tried to do some wheeling and dealing, and then went to London for a little while and came back. So, one of the perks of professional services for me was, hey, here's a bunch of stuff they can offer me and some international travel. But, I guess with all things, you're kind of always looking for the what's next, which for me was when I left professional services to join Lendlease. And I think what I do at Lendlease now is I work in group finance. I came into group statutory reporting, worked on our group cost base, so what is like our group cost controller role, and then now work on like our group management reporting, so looking after the group forecast, our 5-year plan. We do some kind of high-level sensitivities around our strategy, where we think we'll get returns, what cities we should invest in, some of the more strategic thinking, big picture around how all our regions operate and what's, I guess, the best way to kind of bring things forward. So a little bit of looking back, a lot of looking forward, and a lot of interaction with all our finance teams globally. As my side hustle, I sit on the Grad Steerco. So the Finance Graduate Program has a dedicated steering committee internally. So all our grads, whilst they're on the program and those that have rolled off as well, we try and maintain relationships. So I've got, I'm going to say 3 or 4 of the grads that I look after. And then I've obviously got all the grads that have rolled off that I still keep in touch with as well. So it's part of that mentoring, but also, I guess, more structured for the grads that are part of the program to make sure that they've got a touch point that they can ask any questions to, that they've got someone who's looking after their interests in terms of rotations, roll-offs. And if you think about it, there might be some rotations that are more coveted than others. So how do we make sure that everyone's interests are best represented and everyone's getting the type of experience that they're looking for, depending on what their individual needs and circumstances are. And that's really what the Grad Steer Code does. So we kind of direct the overall program from a Lendlease finance perspective, the types of candidates we want to bring into the program, so who we're recruiting, and we're all very actively involved with that recruitment campaign, from doing interviews, looking at applications, to making sure that we're bringing together the right people who we think will have a long and strong career at Lendlease, to then mentoring them throughout the program as well to make sure they're getting the most out of it. So when they roll off the program, they're rolling off into roles that that we can offer them that actually suit what they're looking for, based on what they've studied, what their experience is, and that they can see that long-term potential for a career at Lendlease all the way through. So that's broadly a lot of what I do, a little bit of what I do from a grad program perspective, and it's I think a lot of what I enjoy at Lendlease is that focus on people. I haven't had a day of work where I've been bored. Some days of work are busier than others, unfortunately, but in a way that's also great, because with challenge comes really good opportunity. And I think a lot of the focus on people is what I really enjoy. So you get the best out of the teams that I work with, the grads that I mentor, and then others around the organisation, both that mentor me and that I get to mentor as well. Any questions? Excellent. Kath, I might hand over back to you to run through a little bit more of the program.
Yeah, no problem. I feel like Dan and Michael sort of stole my pitch on it a little bit, but that in the graduate program, you do get 3 rotations within the finance business. So that could be across the group in the financial services, or working within the project and asset-based businesses. But the 3 very distinct rotations, and it's great because you get a breadth of experience that you wouldn't otherwise get if you're sitting in the same role for 2 years. As Michael mentioned, being able to do rotations across 3 different areas helps you navigate where you want to be post the graduate program. So, and you'll have a graduate program manager, Janice, who will look after that and help guide you to make sure that you are in the right fit, especially with the long-term gain being to retain you for as long as we can. So definitely want to keep that relationship going and seeing where your best fit is and what's available based on your skills and experience and what the business needs. But there's also a structured learning program within that 2 years as well. So you'll attend sessions to build on professional and technical skills. And as they've mentioned as well, you get your postgraduate studies in line with accounting that the other business units don't necessarily get with that extra postgraduate support. So it is a nice perk of being a finance graduate with us. But there is a huge emphasis on networking and support structure. I mean, there's just such a good culture across all the graduates within the teams and within the cohorts itself. So as a graduate within the program, you'll be able to meet a lot of the graduates from different areas of the business as part of your cohort. So because I guess you sit within the office, you'll meet people from marketing, people on culture, the digital teams, and everyone's very friendly. And given that the graduate program intakes are a bit smaller than some of the other financial services, you do get to build such a good relationship with senior leaders. Everyone knows each other's names. You all sit near each other. I mean, in my area of the business, I sit near the chief people officer. And you build that relationship. And it's just a nice feeling to have that everyone knows who you are and you can ask them questions anytime. There's not necessarily that hierarchical chain that you would get in other organizations. You can just go over, have a chat with them, ask them questions, but it is really nice to see the networking opportunities and support structure available. It just makes you feel like you're not navigating anything on your own and being able to build that relationship. I mean, I've seen teams of graduates go and hang out in some of our facilities. We've got a little ping pong area, and it's just nice to see that camaraderie outside of work. I mean, you are spending so much time together at work, so being able to enjoy each other's companies as well, it just shows what a good culture that Lendlease does have. And I mean, from our perspective, I love seeing it. It's really nice to see that bond, and you'll be working with each other for years to come as well. So being able to build that rapport and being able to lean on each other, especially within an enterprise support role like finance, people and culture and whatnot, you are supporting the business and supporting a wide range of stakeholders. So always nice to have that relationship. So in terms of our recruitment process, there's 4 stages before offer. So we go open for go live for applications on the 1st of August, where you'll have to submit an application with your CV, transcripts, right to work. Would highly encourage you include all work experience, education, and extracurricular activities. We understand that getting industry experience, especially in the last couple of years with lockdowns and whatnot, hasn't necessarily been easy, but don't discount any part-time work within the hospitality or retail. It all has its merit. And then there is the second stage, which is the online test. So it's a mix of looking at cognitive ability, personality, and situational judgment. You'll be able to do that in one sitting, and you'll actually get feedback on your performance. Not a lot of those sort of testing platforms have that. So it's always nice to have to see how you've gone straight away to get that sort of instant feedback. But after that, you'll complete a video interview. So you'll get assessed on questions across the breadth of our graduate agilities, and it'll give you real insight into the grad roles and the expectations of that. If you're successful, you'll attend a virtual assessment session. So what that looks like is you'll have a group activity assessment and then a one-on-one interview with a couple of stakeholders within the business. You'll be able to share your story, and it's just to give you a mix. I know that sometimes group activities can be really daunting, dealing with different people and perspectives. So being able to have that individual interview afterwards, we do look at both, and both have equal merit. So you've got 2 opportunities to shine and share the reasons why you want to join as a graduate. And if you're successful in that, you'll start the program with us in February 2023. So in terms of what we look for, to be eligible, you do need to be finishing either this year or have completed last year, and we only look at Australian or New Zealand citizens or permanent residents. But in terms of actual behaviours and traits, so as I mentioned before, getting industry experience with the last couple of years or different personal circumstances could be really difficult. Hospitality, retail, being able to have work experience has so much merit. Being able to work under pressure, dealing with people, angry people, dealing with people and building relationships, working in a team, all has its merit within the workplace. So would highly recommend having displaying those sorts of experiences in your CV, in your application at all the steps, because it does go towards building relationships and the communication skills and even problem solving, having to think on your feet with a new solution to appease a customer or appease your manager within a lot of resources is highly, highly beneficial. Being results driven, are you proactive in getting the end result? Are you looking at resources, what you can do, and working within the team to get their ideas and opinions for the end result? Highly motivated. Obviously, we want people who are motivated to work at Lendlease. I really liked Dan's story of being able to come to work every day and look outside, working with cash flow statements for one of the towers that we're building. I mean, being in Barangaroo, you're looking outside and seeing all the work that we've done. We all have that sense of pride, and having that motivation to come into work every day, you can see the tangible aspect of it. Being self-aware, so having a good understanding of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and wanting to improve and having that growth mindset. I mean, as Michael said, you will be a sponge. You're going to learn so much information and really absorb it, take it on, and use it to your advantage and learn as much as you possibly can. Again, being curious, questioning why things are done, and asking your managers, asking everyone as many questions. I mean, even if someone sits in a different team, they'll have a different way of looking at things, and that external perspective can really help grow you as a person. So these are all the sorts of behaviours that we do look for in our graduates. Any questions?
I had another question. It was kind of off topic to kind of what you spoke about, but I was wondering what kind of softwares or programs that you guys kind of utilize and would be expecting graduates to kind of learn in the early kind of first few months of the career at Lendlease.
I'm happy to take this one, Cass. So our expectation is that you know nothing. I think, Dan, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's some Excel training that we provide through the grad program, but broadly it is all on-the-job experience that you'll get, and there's a fair amount of support. So that's kind of where the rest of your grad network comes in. There's handover guides that previous grads have left for you, and our rotations are carved out so that the teams know, I guess, what to expect with a graduate, which is maybe different to, say, someone that comes in with 3 or 4 years of experience in different organizations and that kind of thing. So the baseline expectation is set to give you the best opportunity to learn as much as possible, without any assumption that you know how to do anything, if I put it that way. Dan, Michael, was there anything more that you'd want to elaborate there?
I'd agree with that, Brenda. Like, it's accounting and finance, not digital, so you won't be, coding in Python, for example. I know I certainly don't. But I mean, I guess from the perspective of someone who is doing it every day, Excel is probably the main one, which I agree with Brenda in that if you come in with the fundamentals of Excel, you'll learn the rest of it as you go. You don't need to be coming in and writing macros with VBA. You'll learn it as you go. The other thing that we're kind of sliding towards is like Power BI, for example. That's something that through the grad program, we actually have I think it was a 3-day session on Power BI visualization and data analytics to teach us the basics of how to use that tool. So props to you if you already know how to use it. That's fantastic. But as Brenda said, you don't really need to know as long as you're willing to learn and invest the time in kind of developing those skills yourself.
Okay, I think that's probably the key point. Like anything, like the grad program is designed overall to give everybody the best experience possible, but it's about being curious. I think some of those qualities that Cass had on the screen before, whilst it sounds fairly generic and, everybody kind of has those things as part of the grad program, you realize how important it is to actually exhibit those qualities, and having that genuine interest in learning, I think, is really important. So where we talk about what are good things that people will say about our best grads, it's actually those that not came in with the best capabilities, but those that had the greatest interest and genuine interest in wanting to learn and wanting to develop and, looking to develop those things as much as possible themselves.
How many graduate positions, I guess, within the finance sector would you be potentially hiring for?
Cass, did you want to take this one in terms of total numbers across?
Across finance, I don't know if we've got final take on yet. I know that it does change year to year, but Brenda, what would you say up to?
Like 6 to 9, I'd say, roughly.
Yeah.
And part of it for us is around timing. So this is probably the latest we've started recruitment this year. Like typically we would start recruitment a little bit earlier, in which case, similar to how Dan started in July, we'd get some people starting earlier in the year than what like an official February start date looks like. And equally, I guess, even with a later recruitment process, if there are people that are interested in starting earlier, we'll always take people on to give you as much time to get the experience as possible. And that can then flex with our numbers as well. So, you know, if our cohort intake was expected to be, you know, say 9 finance graduates all starting in February, but 3 wanted to start earlier, like that for us is fantastic. And that might mean that if we've got some of our graduates who are due to roll off the program, that they find a role that they really want that comes up available for them, it kind of creates that fluidity around people coming on and off, because I guess what we're trying to do is find the best fit for people all the time, as organically as we can. Does that kind of answer your question?
No, that's great. Thank you for that. I'll stop the recording now in case students prefer to ask questions that aren't recorded, if it makes you more comfortable. So I'll stop that now as well.